Hi, I'm Lee. Thanks for watching. Have you wanted to play City Skylines without running out of money? Are you frustrated because your cities are choked with traffic? Well, in this series, More Money, Less Traffic, I'll show you how to deal with these problems most players face in Cities Skylines. In this video, I'll show you how to unclog your Metropolis. To do so, we're only going to use the vanilla game, so you won't need any mods or DLCs, although I do have some DLCs and custom assets installed. If I use any of these, I'll be sure to let you know in the description. We'll go through all the milestones up to megalopolis. That's 80,000 cims. Along the way, we'll avoid financial trouble and deal with traffic problems. There's 3 things you'll learn in this series. 1. Lean construction. Only build what you need when you need it. 2. Sound financial management, so you won't run out of money. And 3. Good urban design. And that's more than just good road layout. This also deals with zoning and land use, which causes much of the trouble I see players experiencing online. Now, this is a concept tutorial, so we won't be covering gameplay mechanics. If you're having trouble learning how to lay down roads or set up bus lines, please see other videos or the in-game tutorial for help. We're also not concerned much with aesthetics in this series, so we're going to use a simple grid city like you see here, and that makes it easier for me to expand and keeps our concepts clearer. Now in parts 1 and 2, we started with a bare map and built a small town with basic services, and we spent most of our time talking about financial issues. Starting in part 3, we shifted mostly to a discussion of traffic and urban design. So, if you need financial help, please go back and watch parts 1 and 2. Now part 5 brings us to our last 2 milestones. Let's see where we are right now. At this point, we're a colossal city. We've got a population of 49,000, and that gives us access to the nuclear power plant that we got at the end of the last video. This is easily my favorite power plant because it takes up so much less space and gives so much more power. At 65,000, our city will become a metropolis, which gives us access to our first airport. We won't be spending a lot of time talking about airports. At 80,000, we will become a megalopolis, which will give us access to the larger international airport, which has the built-in metro station. Now, I've talked a lot about urban and traffic design principles in the last 2 videos, but in this video, our city really gets big enough to experience some serious traffic issues. So we're going to experiment a little bit and cause some of these so we can understand how to clear them up. To start off, though, let's take a look at a couple of things that I want to just bust some myths on. I see a lot of advice given online, and it's not necessarily bad advice, it's just that it doesn't always work for every circumstance. And there are times when doing the opposite actually works just fine in your city. First off, I want to talk about intersections. In a lot of cases, I see people recommending that you don't want to create too many intersections. But if we look at our city, we've got a really big grid, and especially along Main Street, we've got an intersection about every 10 units or 10 squares apart all the way across our city. And we've even got some dense areas. But if we look at our traffic view, we're not experiencing any serious problems. Sure, we've got some red areas, but that's just because there's always traffic in that part of our Main Street. So what do we have to say about intersections? What can we learn so far just by looking at the city that we have here that's just under 50,000 cims? Well, first off, it is important to make sure you don't have too many intersections that are busy too close together. A principle I want to introduce that I talked about at some level but haven't really come out and said is that you want to have multiple small things, not one big one. So we could have one big highway running through the center of our city and a few or maybe just one big intersection connecting every part of our city to every other part of our city. Instead, what we have is a few main streets and a web of side streets that connect to everything. Now, I'm going to talk about webs versus some of the other advice that I see online in a second, but for right now, I just want to point out that many of these small intersections along these larger thoroughfares, these large avenues, actually works out really well. That's because everything is connected. When we have a busy intersection like right here, we don't want to have too close to another busy intersection like we have right here at Mill Street. When we have the smaller intersections, we don't have so much turning traffic or crossing traffic that it becomes a problem. If you look, we're not even using traffic signals at most of these junctions. We've just got a traffic signal right here at High Street, and then all along Main Street we're good until we get to another major avenue here at 11th Street. And in the other direction, we've got several small streets, and then we have another traffic signal here at Mill Street. So the idea is that you need to have a lot of connections. Multiple direct routes diffuse traffic. That's a corollary or just another idea that comes off of the idea that multiple small is better than one big. So we need balance when it comes to intersections because more connections will help to relieve the pressure that you would have if you only have one connection. Now, talking about intersections, you do want to make sure that you don't have them too close together. Right here we've got a major avenue right here at High Street, another major intersection here at Mill Street that feeds our industrial traffic into Mill Park and Forest Park, and then we have a highway interchange with two busy intersections, and then over here in Cargo Park, this intersection right here at Cargo Boulevard is not so busy right now, but eventually we're going to build out here and extend Main Street. So that intersection is going to be busy too. But you can see that we've got at least 20 units between almost each and every one of these major intersections. With our diamond interchanges, that is especially important to make sure that these two intersections on either side of our interchange are not too close together. And that's because you've got left turns that conflict in many different ways. You've got left turns that would be coming off of Main Street, trying to turn onto the ramp. You've got turning traffic off of this ramp here, turning onto Main Street, and the same over here, trying to get off and on at the other ramp. Now, if we make sure that this space between these two legs of the interchange are far enough apart, then when trucks and cars turn off of the ramp and onto Main Street, they will have enough room to be stored while this light would be red. Right now it's a stop sign, but eventually we'll have to upgrade that to a traffic signal as volumes increase. So we want to make sure there's enough storage space, especially at our busier diamond interchanges. In some cases, the intersections just get too busy for diamond interchanges to work, but right now everything's fine. We don't need to go to a diverging diamond, a single point urban interchange, which those don't work super well in vanilla anyway. We don't have to go to a cloverleaf interchange. There's all sorts of options that we have, but right now this simple diamond is doing the trick. Now, another thing I just want to point out before I move on to our next point is this intersection, this diamond interchange looks a little funny because we've got this rail line running right here. So I had to build this intersection right here because I was threading the needle between the highway and the railroad. Now over here I had much more room. I didn't have any developed real estate or any roads to worry about or any rails, so I just built it further out apart over here. I didn't want to have to make our ramps longer and then have to cross over the rail in order to get up to Main Street. Also, what I've done here, this is an important thing that we can do to help alleviate traffic sometimes, especially where there might be a busy intersection otherwise, is we actually grade separated this street right here, which still connects our industrial areas to each other, where trucks can go without having to deal with conflicting and crossing traffic here at Main Street. So if the trucks need access to Main Street and the highway, they can go down Mill Street. If they don't, then they can use this side street right here that is grade separated from Main Street and all of the highway traffic. You can use those types of techniques in helping to alleviate traffic problems. As you remember, in part 3 and 4, well, especially in part 4, we had a lot of traffic crossing on Mill Street, and it was getting to be too much for it alone to handle. So we built a second connection over here. Also, we want to dispel another thing that I see a lot online is the idea that you want to build in a tree. Now, I don't think that it's a bad idea to think hierarchically, as in we've got our highways that are like a trunk, and our avenues that are like the limbs, and our side street, which are like the branches off of the limbs. But we don't want to carry that analogy too far and think that we always want to isolate all of our side streets from our arterials, from our limbs, or from our branches. From our trunks. Now, trunk roads, they can come in all sorts of different types. Usually, you don't want to have a lot of intersections, small intersections on trunk roads because they're designed for speed, and intersections will definitely impair speed. Now, highways aren't the only way to build a trunk road. There's other ways we can do that, and I'll probably show you how to do that in later tutorials using avenues, and even side streets. So we've got our trunk road here with our highway, and we've got our limbs, but our limbs are connected to all of the branches and not just certain ones, certain collectors. So my advice would be that in some cases it might be wise to build your city as a tree, but most of the time in trees, we're not looking to go from leaf to leaf. We're only going leaf to trunk or trunk to leaf. So when we build cities, especially the dense urban core, we want to make sure that we build in a web, because then we have multiple direct routes and multiple connections that gives our cims plenty of flexibility to take different routes back and forth to work and shopping. The other thing that this does is it also makes it so that walking distance can be easily had between work, shopping, and home, as well as the park. What you see here is a city that I've got commercial zoned along our main avenues and in our core, and then in between all of these avenues, we've got residential. And then as I densified our city, I built offices in between the residential and the commercial. This has a benefit of separating the noise from commercial zones and busy arteries from our residential neighborhoods, which is exactly what we want. Now, the other thing I did is I also built separation between our noisy industrial areas and our residential areas. That's important. Also, we want to keep our pollution sources like we have here in Mill Park. We've got a bunch of garbage incinerators, coal power plants, as well as many polluting industrial buildings through here. So we want to make sure that we keep those industrial buildings away from the residential areas, both because of noise and ground pollution. Now we also want to build our industry alongside our highways. What that does is it gives us opportunities to have multiple interchanges like we have here at Douglas Avenue, we have another at Main Street, another here at High Street, and another at 11th Street. All of these serve these industrial areas and make it so that there aren't trucks just trying to go through one interchange like at Main Street, like we had when we started our city originally. So don't think in terms of a tree, think in terms of a web, and make sure that there's lots of interconnection. like we have here, Mill Park. Trucks from delivery trucks can get into our core to deliver to our commercial zones through multiple streets. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 different ways to get in from our industrial areas into downtown or University Park. We even have connections built across our highway that don't include interchanges. We definitely want to employ that because that keeps our traffic from all having to flow through the same busy places where we've got intersections to provide highway access. So we don't need to have, we do need to have a hierarchy, but we don't need that hierarchy to be such that all of our zone types are restricted from being able to get to our other zone types by only having to take 1 or 2 routes, or even 3. Instead, we've got almost infinite numbers of routes to go from one end of the city to the other. And to look at our traffic flow. It is busier in the densest parts of our city and in our industrial area, but there's nowhere where we're having any serious traffic issues. Right now our traffic flow is at 87%, but as I've mentioned in previous videos, that number is really pretty misleading. I've had cities that are in the 80s, and I've got a backup that is increasingly getting worse and not clearing. And I've also had cities that are in the 50s and 60s that just have a lot of traffic and not a lot of highways, just a lot of intersections, and all the traffic moves. So don't pay too much attention to this unless you just want bragging rights. Otherwise, just take a visual inspection of your city and make sure that your traffic is always moving, that there aren't any backups building and building and building. Alright, so now that we've debunked the idea that you can have too many intersections, there's really a balance there, and that you want to build in a web, not so much in a tree, well, let's move on and expand our city. Now, we've already got enough capacity here for 51,000 cims, but we have 21% unemployment. That's because there's not a whole lot of people dying, and there's not a whole lot of people who are seniors. Now, at some point, we're going to have problems with that, and this population number is going to retreat. Hopefully, we won't have a big death wave involved, but I actually expect that we will have a few of those before this tutorial is finished. So what we need to do right now, our top priority before we even expand to our new residential area, is we really need to add some jobs. And we've got lots of real estate here in our core city that we've got so far. I can build some office right straight through here, in between our industrial area and downtown, and I can build some over here along with some more industrial over here in Cargo Park. So I'll take care of that, and then afterwards I'm going to go ahead and buy a couple of squares over here, and we'll expand to this neighborhood over here. I could expand over south, whatever direction that is beyond University Park, but I don't want to do that because it's really very connected as it is, and it won't give us as many opportunities. It won't give us as many opportunities to show some of the connection issues that we have, or bottlenecking issues that we want to experiment with over here. So I'm going to build on the other side of both of my highways over here and put a new neighborhood over here near the river and extend off of Main Street. That'll give us an opportunity to really experiment with highway access getting into downtown from a residential area, from a bedroom neighborhood really, and it will also give us a chance to see what possible solutions work and which ones don't work so well. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and take care of that, and I will also move this power plant out here beyond our railroad tracks, as well as some of our garbage facilities, so that it's not all consolidated in one area downtown. All right, I'll be back. Okay, so I have built a new neighborhood over here off of my highway. I only have one way in or out, and that is on this boulevard here, which is called Emerson Boulevard. And it looks like there's already a lot of traffic coming through here. I forgot to fix some intersection issues here. That'll hopefully get the traffic moving along faster. But what I've done here is I've created two roughly equal size geographical neighborhoods that will fill in hopefully over time and allow us to demonstrate an experiment that, having these multiple intersections, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 of them, is better than having just one or two, for example. Also, the other thing I'm going to demonstrate is that, whether the highway interchange is actually going to be the way to go here for traffic getting in and out of our city. So give me a second while I fix some of these issues, and we'll let the clock run, and I'll be back. Alright, so we're seeing some serious issues here with our highway interchange. Let's go ahead and try changing this from a stop sign to a traffic light and see if that helps manage things a little bit better. Alright, so the biggest problem that we have here using a traffic light is that cross traffic has to stop for the ramp, even though most of this traffic is turning right. I mean, there's no reason for it to turn left. So what we can do is, just for the time being, change this to be a stop sign for the main road. So this will allow everybody to go through, make the right turns, go straight through. It'll also make everybody else stop if they're going straight through this intersection, and it'll make it so that right turns can just turn right without having to stop. So we'll see how this affects things. I mean, some of this is just move-in traffic, I think. I think our unemployment is actually pretty low. Yeah, it is. We added quite a lot of industrial and office, as well as our residential area over here. So the other thing we did is we put the power plants out over here, along with a couple of incinerators, so that it's not quite as congested over here in Mill Park. We'll probably move some of those other incinerators out of there too. Let's take a look at our traffic view and just see what's going on around our city. It looks like that interchange is flowing pretty nicely for the time being, so we're just going to let that all fill in and just see what develops. Alright, now we're starting to see some issues over here in Emerson Heights, where this intersection is backing up. Why don't we go ahead and make that a traffic signal? Hopefully that'll clear out a little easier, because it's really backing up bad. Now the other thing I want to point out is that even though this is a free-flowing intersection, this is a really good example of why we want to make sure that if we build an intersection that has a lot of traffic volume going through it, we really need to be conscious that it doesn't have a 90-degree angle or some really oblique angle. We want to have 45-degree angles that'll help move things along quite a lot faster. So something that we might want to entertain doing is making it so that there's multiple ways in and out of this neighborhood. But that doesn't even seem like it's going to necessarily help a whole lot, because we still got a lot of people coming off of the highway here. So some of this could be moving traffic, so it might clear up as Sims move in. But eventually they'll all have to go to work or go shopping, so we're just going to zoom in here, and we're going to add a little capacity to this ramp so that people can get through here a little faster. Just increase the size here to being a 3-lane ramp. So that way we have 2 right turn lanes, getting more people through that intersection at any given moment. We're still just leaving that as a stop sign for the cross traffic. We'll see how that works out here. Alright, so this is obviously not working out so well. Let's see what happens if we widen this road right here. I'm going to use a custom asset to do that. It's a special small 4-lane road, 4-lane avenue that won't take up any more space. And what that should do is give us, if we expand the capacity over here, we'll use this 4+1, so that we'll have 2 right turn lanes. And that will allow more traffic to get through this intersection. Those are 2 assets that are custom. You have to have the mass transit DLC to use both of them, I think, or at least one of them. The 4+1, the asymmetrical road here that has 3 lanes on one side and 2 lanes on the other side. Hopefully this will allow more traffic to get through and get off of that highway. Alright, so back to our too many intersections conversation, or making sure that busy ones aren't too close together. This is an opportunity to see what happens when we put too many intersections too close together. We've got these interchanges really aren't too terribly close together, but we've got a serious problem in that traffic that's trying to enter from the opposite direction is being caught up in the backup on this ramp here, which also makes it so that this ramp can't function. So it really exposes the problems that we have with cloverleaf system interchanges, or just cloverleaf interchanges in general. We've got too many intersections too close together, too many merge points, too many conflict points for things to go wrong. So we're seeing that in full effect here. The other thing we're seeing here is we're seeing that this diamond really isn't being all that effective. Now I could go ahead and build a much larger interchange here, but I don't really know that that's going to solve any of the problems. Now, one of the things that I do think might help our cause here is if we were to go ahead and make... we didn't put anything over here except for residential. We didn't put any commercial or anything over here. So the Sims have to leave this neighborhood to do just about everything except for go home, go visit friends, and the game doesn't really simulate that. So what we're going to do is we're going to add some commercial zones over here and see if this helps alleviate any of the traffic pain our Sims are currently experiencing. Alright, so it's evident that our Sims are not only having problems getting into the neighborhood, they're having problems getting into other neighborhoods from our new neighborhood here, because this backup here at Main Street is certainly has a lot to do with all of these cars getting on the highway. Now, if this wasn't backed up a little bit, we would have even worse problems than we do now. So we really are not having a good time here with this, are we? So why don't we go ahead and connect this boulevard right here and see what happens. Because what's going to happen, what we have here is we're forcing the Sims into one little highway interchange, which seems like it should be able to handle all of that, but it really doesn't do such a hot job. Now, we've got a lot of jobs that are close here in Cargo Park, and some of this could get dispersed because some of it will get on the highway and some of it won't. So let's go ahead and see what happens when we reconnect this. Alright, so I've got a traffic signal over here on this side of the interchange. I also widened the road. So we really need to have a traffic signal working at this side of the intersection as well, because we've got a lot of traffic that's coming from this direction now that we didn't used to have. So let's go ahead and fix that as well. This, of course, is going to do pretty much nothing to help with our backup onto the highway here, but it will help us. It will help regulate some of this traffic that's coming in and going out. I think it's pretty easy to see at this point that this is not working out so well. I mean, even if the Sim wants to go to the store that might be in his backyard, he can't walk down the street. So we're going to go ahead and connect all of this. Well, we've gotten some relief, but we still have a lot of gridlock in this part of town because there's just so many Sims all trying to go in the same place. Maybe we can draw some of them to other roads by connecting some of these other streets, make it a little shorter way to get to Cargo Park. Because some of these Sims, let's take a look at the routes that they're using here. When they get on the highway, no, they're all going downtown. But there are a few who are going to work in this neighborhood right here. So we could potentially make it a little shorter route if we connect some of these streets over here. So let's try that. Looks like we're having a death wave. I'm not going to cover that in this series, but let's just say that they're the most annoying aspect of the vanilla game. I usually play, actually I always play with a mod when I'm not doing YouTube tutorials, because it really, really drives me crazy. I'll be back. Well, I'm fairly certain that people have moved into this neighborhood over here, so I am really not convinced that this is going to make a whole lot of difference. So why don't we try something different here? Let's go ahead and do something really unorthodox here. Let's close this interchange, at least in this direction. We're not having any problems with cims coming off in the other direction, but it's a real problem that they're coming out and back and forth from downtown. So we're just going to let the traffic light turn green, and then we're going to leave them all stuck out there. And so we'll see if this gets things flowing any better. We don't need that traffic light. We might not need this traffic light. Alright, so now all these cims are going to have to find another way to get there. They'll have to use Emerson Boulevard and some of these other side streets that come off of it. We'll see if this makes things flow any smoother. Okay, so we've got a lot of traffic on this street on Forest Avenue here. It looks like we could probably benefit from having a traffic signal here. As much as I hate to stop things up, I think I'm going to. And I'm going to widen that area right there, which should give us a dedicated left turn lane. So now, hopefully that will flow a little more smoothly. We're still experiencing a huge amount of gridlock over here, though. We are approaching our milestone, though, of 65,000, which will make us a metropolis. And I'm going to add a signal over here. Maybe that'll move a little more smoothly if we can get things to work a little more orderly. Alright, it looks like we've tried just about everything in our bag of tricks here, but this one route into and out of our neighborhood here is really totally messing us up. It's not working. We have a huge death wave that's leaving a whole lot of abandoned buildings. I'm going to have to go ahead and clean that up, but in the meantime, I'm also going to, well, no, this is starting to clear out a little bit. Maybe it will clear out. I need to make it so that I think I need to add some trash facilities. I'm going to do that. I'm also going to take care of some of those abandoned buildings. I'll be back. Alright, we're in Metropolis. In spite of our death wave, we have managed to achieve 65,000 in population. Last, we have our megalopolis milestone, which is where we'll conclude this series. So let's go ahead and finish demolishing some of these abandoned buildings from our death wave, which is still in progress. Hopefully our hearses will be able to catch up pretty soon. Alright, it looks like the tide is turning on our death wave, I hope. It does not look like the tide is turning on our traffic problems. This neighborhood is hopelessly paralyzed. So we're going to... it seems like it's functioning a little bit better without the interchange, but it's still not functioning very well. So what we're going to do about that is I'm going to add another connection into this neighborhood. I've laid out, roughed out some streets here. This one here will be a boulevard connecting to Lake Road. This one here as well. And then we'll extend Cargo Boulevard out in this neighborhood too. So I'm going to go ahead and extend Cargo Boulevard, and we'll see if that makes any difference, has any impact on getting their cims in and out of this neighborhood. I'll be back. Okay, so we've got it built. Cargo Boulevard now goes all the way out to Lee Boulevard out here. And we've got a couple of connecting streets that run out of Emerson Heights into Cargo Boulevard. So now instead of just having one way in and out of the neighborhood, we've got two ways in and out of this neighborhood. And we'll see if the traffic patterns, how they change up once we let this run a little bit. Alright, so it looks like things are moving a lot better up here in Emerson Heights. It looks like we could probably just eliminate that junction, that traffic light right here. Let's see what happens when we go to a stop sign here. Hopefully that will make things flow a little more freely through here. So this seems to be functioning much better. We still have a bottleneck over here on this other side of the highway here on Emerson Boulevard, but we've really relieved a ton of pressure on this side of the highway simply by opening up an alternate route, a second connection. Now it happens to be an avenue, so it's able to handle a lot of capacity, a lot of traffic. So now it's just a matter of this catching up. I'm not sure if this is ever going to clear out or not. I'd like to think it would, but there's no real way of knowing. What we can do, though, is test and see if this highway interchange will help us maybe get some of that traffic to stop backing up. So let's give that a shot. Probably going to need our traffic light here again, which is probably going to ball things up, but we'll see what happens. Alright, so it's pretty obvious that this is not working out very well, and a lot of that is because we've got an intersection that's so close. But the problem too is that, you know, even this intersection's backing up quite a bit. Traffic is just not moving around as well as we would like, and a lot of it is just because this highway really draws a lot of traffic to it. As you can see, we don't have a whole lot of cars using Emerson Boulevard to get to Main Street, but it's not the only place that we've affected traffic patterns. They're not coming down to Cargo Boulevard anymore either. And they're also backing up the intersection over here, the ramp over here at Main Street. It has a lot more traffic on it than it did before too. So why don't we go ahead and set that back the way it was, because we've just turned this neighborhood into a complete traffic jam at this point. And while we wait for that to work its way through, let's check out our unemployment. We're at 25%. That's really extremely high. So I'm going to go over here and rezone some things to make them offices. And I might expand our industrial park over here. Another thing I'm going to do, you know, one of the things that you'll notice is that sometimes our delivery traffic will back up all the other traffic behind it. So what might otherwise flow pretty nicely won't, just because you have to wait for the deliveries. So since offices don't really have the delivery problem that industrial zones have, we're going to go ahead and rezone this entire section right here to be offices. And we're also going to expand our industrial zone right here. Okay, so we're seeing a lot of traffic backing up here in this new area that we've built, and it looks like our unemployment is probably caught up. We've lost a lot of population too. So I'm going to go ahead and complete this area over here and connect all these roads. Hopefully that will give another outlet that will allow this to sort of calm down. All right, I'll be back. Okay, so one of the problems that we have here is that our, in order to complete this boulevard out to Lake Avenue, Lake Road, we need to separate the highway grade from the surface grade. So we could build bridges and all that fun stuff with the boulevards, but I think it would be easier if we just elevated the highway instead. Now, we don't have any mods, so this is going to be one of those situations where we need to demolish the highway and rebuild it. So I'll pause the game and take care of that. And we'll build an interchange here as well as an intersection here, just to see how that works out. Alright, so that has been completed. I did not finish the interchange. I'm going to build that in just a bit here. I just wanted to check on and see if my traffic flow was doing okay. Looks like I've got a big backup here at Main Street getting off at that exit. I don't have too many other really bad trouble spots. It looks like Emerson Boulevard is moving really well. Cargo Boulevard, on the other hand, is a little bit of a problem. And a lot of that's because of left turn traffic. Let's add another lane here. And see if we can't. Let's go ahead and use our 4+1. And see if we can't make that a little bit better. Looks like we could use a traffic signal over here in Forest Park. I'm gonna try that. Another thing that would probably help us a little bit is if we just had a wider road. Let's go with our, just add a little bit of, well, no, it's clearing out now. Seems to be working pretty well. All right, so maybe the only thing we can do here is just add an extra couple of lanes. I just used this small 4-lane right here. That should set up 2 left turn lanes there, and hopefully it'll be enough to get this to move a little bit better. So our only really bad traffic problem seems to be at this intersection, and it just cleared out. This one up here doesn't look so great either. We could probably get rid of the traffic signal here. It doesn't look like it's too busy. Let's go ahead and let that run freely. You can see that there's a lot to micromanaging traffic flow so that it gets moving a little better. Here's another place we could probably use another traffic signal. The stop sign is really jamming trucks up here, and I never put a traffic signal in there. Just putting one in there instantly relieves that mess. Another thing that would probably benefit us is if we made this a traffic signal. I don't know if this intersection is doing okay. Looks like it is. Let's see if there's any other trouble spots. Looks like everything is working pretty well. Alright, so our traffic is most definitely thick. We're at 80%. Like I said, that's really only for bragging rights. Yeah, okay, we have another trouble spot right here too. It'd be great to see this move a little bit more. Maybe we could add some lanes to expand the capacity there, but I don't know if that's really going to help or not. It might help a little bit. What else might help is having, let's go ahead and make this a 4+1. And we'll just make this 3 lanes right here in each direction. Do 4+1 there. And then just let that work for a little while and see how that plays out. You can put trees on this boulevard since they won't look dead anymore. Now here's another place where we could probably benefit from having a 3rd lane in each direction, so we're just going to go a little crazy here with these 4+1 roads. See if that helps move traffic a little bit more smoothly. Alright, so obviously our traffic flow leaves a little bit to be desired. Let's check out our unemployment. Well, it's low. That's good. So we've got some bottlenecks here and there. Widening the road or just changing up the lane assignments seems to have helped a little bit. But obviously we've still got just a lot of traffic coming into town. Now, one of the things that we haven't tried in a while, and I'm going to build an interchange out here first before we do this, but I want to try this interchange one last time and see if we have any serious traffic problems result. I'll be right back after I finish these. Alright, we're going to let that interchange take effect here. Let's check our unemployment really quick. Alright, we need more jobs. I'm going to go ahead and add that. I want to make sure we hit our 80,000 mark here so that we can conclude this before I introduce the metros. Yay, so we made it to Megalopolis. That will conclude our development as far as how big our city is going to get. We won't be growing it any further than we've got right here. We've got plenty of extra room probably to get more cims in, but we're only interested in making it to 80,000, which we did. So now we have to take a look and see what our traffic flow situation looks like once I get done setting all this up. Okay, so let's take a look at around our city of 80,000 cims. Where do we have any trouble spots in our traffic flow? It looks like everything is actually working really well. Got some busyness going on downtown. A lot of that is because of our buses. We've always got a bottleneck here in Forest Park. As long as those industries are operating, I don't think that's ever going to really change. Our interchange out here is busy, but not crazy busy, like the interchange that we built over here at Emerson Heights. We are having a lot of traffic coming through Emerson Heights, but there's nothing that's really so overwhelming that we're not able to keep up with it. So I would say we've successfully built a city that doesn't have to have a lot of highway. We didn't even add a whole lot in the way of highway to begin with. Okay, so let's go back and debunk some more myths. Just a couple more. First off, while we do that, while we have this discussion, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to reopen this interchange one last time before we close the book on it as to whether it's a good idea or a bad idea. Let me go ahead and set traffic signals up here. And hopefully that will work out. We'll keep an eye on it. So, we talked about too many intersections. We talked about building in a tree. We talked about, we're talking a little bit about highways in just a minute. But I also want to talk about roundabouts. If we look at our city, not once did we build one single roundabout. So roundabouts, I'm not going to poo-poo them. I think that they're wonderful. And especially in real life, I think they really solve a lot of problems that traffic lights wouldn't otherwise be able to handle without just creating a lot more congestion. That having been said, I also don't think they're the be-all to end-all. At City Skylines, you really use a lot of real estate to build a roundabout. And they can look pretty and everything, but they only look pretty, in my opinion, if they work pretty. And a lot of times I see that there's too much traffic causing too many problems, for them to actually function properly. For example, if you have, like we have right here, we talked about how these two intersections, if they were any closer together, they would create massive problems with traffic flow. As it is, they're close enough together, and they still create some problems as our city's grown in size. We've got a backup going on over here too. Now, if we went ahead and we built a roundabout here to solve this problem, there's going to be so much traffic, it's really not going to solve a whole lot for us because the intersections are just too close together for a roundabout to work. So you have to have the right flow of traffic. If you have too much or too much traffic, or you've got them too close together with the wrong traffic level, then you're going to end up with trouble because the roundabout just won't be able to handle the traffic flow any more than this highway interchange can right here. Now, sure, we could set up a diverging diamond interchange right here. There's definitely enough traffic. It's probably worth thinking about. But most of it's all going in one direction. So if we just redesign this just a little bit better, we wouldn't even have to necessarily spend all the resources it would take to make that interchange work. So roundabouts are great, but make sure that you don't overwhelm your roundabouts any more than you overwhelm your highway interchanges. If you make sure you don't limit your cims to single connections between places. A lot of times I see roundabouts on either side of a highway interchange, but it's the only highway interchange in the whole city. That's not going to work. So you want to make sure that you have enough to distribute the load, enough alternate routes. So remember, multiple direct routes diffuse traffic. Multiple small is better than one big. So go ahead and use roundabouts. Just don't expect them to solve every traffic problem when really what you need is more connections. All right, so we've reopened that interchange. We know traffic flow is going really, really well. Now all of a sudden it's backing up like crazy here. Now mind you, these intersections aren't probably designed to handle as much traffic as this neighborhood's going to dump onto this interchange and onto these roads. But that's not really the entire point, though, is it? The problem is that this highway interchange has such a well of gravity that it's pulling all the traffic off of even Cargo Boulevard, so that our cims are just getting on the highway and going straight into downtown that way, and maybe even into Cargo Park in some ways. In some cases, let's take a look at our routes and see. No, they're not going into Cargo Park, but they are definitely going into downtown. That's the only way they're going to get to downtown, probably. Let's take a look and see if anybody's using alternative routes. It looks like in some cases they're going into Forest Park and maybe over in Mill Park a little bit on Main Street, but most of them are getting on the highway and going straight there. If we look at how many people are using the highway to get home, well, they're using it exclusively, probably. Okay, so it looks like there's a few people coming out of the Sycamore District. Mill Park, otherwise, is for the most part just using the highway to get back and forth. So this is really not an ideal situation. This highway interchange actually causes us more traffic problems than it solves. So we're going to close it permanently. Now there's nothing wrong with having those intersections so close right there, like we have right now. But that only works. They function much better when that highway is not in play, when that interchange is not there. It just diverts so much traffic to places that can't handle it. Meanwhile, it disperses quite nicely in 4 different places, one of which is actually a highway interchange, but it's not as if this interchange over here is creating as much trouble, as much trouble as the interchange right here is. So that one interchange really shows that these parallel routes that we have created here are much more effective than if we were to build highways. So a lot of that is because of the gravitational pull. I call it gravity because As soon as some object with a high gravitational pull comes into range of another object, it just can't help but be attracted. Our cims are always attracted to the fastest route. As soon as we open up this highway interchange, they're all attracted to taking the highway into town. Once we get rid of that gravity, then they make better decisions and the traffic is dispersed more across the entire street grid. That's exactly what we want. So in cases where we could use a highway to get across town from one neighborhood to maybe the city center, be careful. You can use avenues to do it. You can use highways. But a lot of times avenues are going to be easier to handle because we can build more of them without having to take up as much real estate. More connections allow for traffic without drawing so much of it because avenues are faster, but they're not so much faster that the cims can't resist taking them. So another thing too is we want to have smaller interchanges. We don't want to have one big giant massive interchange that handles all the traffic, and that's what we have over here in Cargo Park if we allow our cims to use the highway to get across town. This isn't even that far. So this is why you see partial interchanges in major cities in real life. That's because sometimes adding the highway actually creates more problems than it's worth. The other thing that we could have done to solve some of our traffic issues, and what we're going to do right now, after we have one more conversation, is we can use public transportation. If you remember, we only built transit lines in the central part of our city through downtown. And those bus lines are getting used quite a lot. One of the things that I also would just like to address, though, is this idea that buses create traffic. Well, if you look at this, yeah, of course they create traffic. They drive on the street. But we've got a lot of buses running on both of these lines, as you can see. And these streets are functioning quite well. One bus can take off as much as 30 cars. So keep that in mind when you're designing your street grid, when you're designing your transit system. The buses can actually do a lot of good. We can actually turn off all of our buses if we wanted to. Since we're playing in day-only mode, you can go ahead and turn off all of these bus lines. Now it's going to take a while for that to take everything off, but if we were to wait, would traffic get a little better? Well, sure it would. But a lot of that has to do more with our zoning. We don't really need all of these buses to be running, these bus lines, because even out here in the center of our residential neighborhood, 2, 4, about 5 blocks to walk to some sort of work. To go to shopping, about 4 blocks, give or take. In any direction. So, and then that's looking at the center of a neighborhood. Over here, we've got the same story. 4 or 5 blocks takes you to a commercial or office from any of these residential areas. So, there's a huge advantage to zoning, intermingling, and interconnecting all of your residential zones with office and commercial. You want commercial in the core, where it's quiet, buffered by the offices, and then the residential in between. And then you'll get this wonderful situation where their cims do not need to drive. They can just walk to work. If we look at routes, we can see that all the workers in this building are walking to work. They'll walk many, many blocks to do it too. Here we've got one that's actually driving. And a lot of that is probably because we took away the bus lines. So this whole idea that buses create too much traffic, well, maybe there's something to be said for that, but that's only if you pay too much attention to the color of the roads. And also, it's probably wouldn't be true like if we went ahead and we built a bus line that went down into Cargo Park, or even down here into the center of this little neighborhood here where I've got a lot of office buildings, or over here where I've got even more office buildings and commercial and things like that. I bet you that this traffic situation would actually, the buses would actually remove some of this traffic and make it flow a little better. I'm not going to spend a whole lot of time on that because what we really are here to do is we're here to build metros. And if we take a look at our buses, we've probably picked up just about everybody at this point. Yeah, we don't have any buses running on these lines anymore. So we'll go ahead and turn these buses back on. We got an idea of what it looks like when we don't have the buses. It does cut down on traffic, but that's only because our city is zoned in a way that our Sims don't have to walk very far. Alright, so now for metros, we have a few obviously very busy corridors in our city that are the main arteries. So let's connect them. We have the red line running down Main Street. We can extend that beyond just Cargo Park and all the way up in here to Emerson Heights. And then we have the blue line, which runs along High Street downtown. We can extend that into Lake Park and even go along Lake Road up to Lee Boulevard and back into Emerson Heights. Then we have the green line that runs on Douglas Avenue. We can run that beyond there into Cargo Park and down Cargo Boulevard all the way into Emerson Heights. So we're going to go ahead and build those transit lines, and I will be back to have a little more discussion. Looks like it's time for another death wave. Yes, those really do get old. Anyway, we have completed our metro lines. We have the green line, the blue line that runs down High Street and Lake, and we have the red line that runs down Main and Emerson. Alright, so now we need to make sure that we have enough. Actually, let's just take a look at our bus system for starters. The red line's been running the longest, I think. So let's take a look at how much
On the way of ridership we're seeing here, it looks like ridership is really tanked. Now, part of the reason for that is because, well, major reason for that is because Metro is now competing with that bus line for cims to use it. Now you'll notice that about roughly every 2 stops on the bus, I've got a metro station. In the real world, people will walk about a half a mile for rapid transit, as opposed to buses where they may only walk about half as far, about a quarter of a mile, to get to a stop. So the idea here is that we're not going to make our cims wait for several different stops to get through the city. We're going to actually set that so about every few blocks, about twice as far as we'd have bus stops spread, we'll have a metro. That's because we just don't need as many stops, and the cims will still use it. We saw that cims were walking just fine without the bus even. Now we really don't even need this bus. As you can see, our metro lines are really starting to take over. Now, something else you'll notice is that we've got a station out here, and this is, surprise, surprise, this is one of our stations out in Emerson Heights. All 3 of our stations out here are completely slammed with passengers, as is our station at Cargo Park. But we're still getting a fair amount of traffic even in our city center, and it's not likely that our trains will be able to keep up. So we're going to go ahead and put that at 400%. So our cims won't be left with too few trains to be able to take on that line. And then we're also going to force the cims to use that new line instead of the bus line. Alright, so the green line. We've got a couple of busy stops, and surprise, they're out in Emerson Heights. This isn't working too badly though. We could probably do with a few more trains, so let's go ahead and add that, run that up to 150%. And let's look at the bus line. The bus line, as the red line did, has also tanked in its usage, so we're going to get rid of that bus line. We don't really need it. And already our transit system is using, we've got higher ridership than we ever had before because the metros are so much more efficient and so much faster, and they're reaching such a large area. Our cims are loving it. Alright, so blue line. What's our busiest station? Once again, it's out in Emerson Heights. But we do have a few others that are pretty busy too. Looks like that one's probably in our city center. Yes, it is. Alright, so we're going to increase the amount of trains on the blue line. We'll make that 300%. And increase the frequency of trains on that line too. Alright, so we will take a look at that. We'll also take a look at blue line ridership has dropped like a stone. Let's go ahead and get rid of that line. Now we also have a few parallel lines that we set up, if you remember. It was too busy for one bus line to handle everything going through downtown. So we added parallel bus lines to compensate for that. We have a couple that parallel the red line, and we have these two here that parallel the blue line. Let's take a look at those and see if they've been affected by lower ridership. As expected, this is doing much better than before. Now, since this is a parallel line and it's in our dense neighborhood, we don't want to overwhelm our metro, but so we'll keep this line, but we're going to cut the funding down to, let's say, 125%. And we'll look at the other bus line here. This line here is definitely tanked as well. So let's go ahead and drop it to 150. And line 6. There's still a few stops that are busy. Take a look at which ones they are. They're near metro stations. Big surprise there. So let's go ahead and reduce the amount of buses on this line. Go down to 125% on that one. And then finally line 7. Hit 2. Well, actually this one is getting used quite a lot still. That's the other one that runs along Oak Avenue here. So why don't we go ahead and actually, let's just tweak the stops on this line for a bit here. Spend a little time making sure these match up with our metro station stops. Alright, let's take a look at our bus lines here again. Alright, so now we've really increased our ridership here. A lot of people are taking this bus line, so why don't we go ahead and increase the number of buses on it. Now sometimes in your core you just need more metros. We don't have any running through the center, but chances are if we did, as our city expands, then we would probably have the ridership to support that. Let's take a look at other bus lines and see how they're working. Line 4 looks like it's got pretty good numbers there, not too full, not too empty. Well, this line is definitely not getting a whole lot of use. Which is not really a surprise. It doesn't run very far from the blue line. Could we get rid of it? We could. Why not just reduce the ridership and just reduce the amount of buses, reduce the capacity? All right. Line 6. This is a busy line now. And that's because it gets further away from those metro lines. So let's go ahead and double the... Well, let's just go up to 250. And line 7. Lots of buses on this line. Looks like we're mostly keeping up with the demand though. One looks good. That one looks good. And this one looks a little overwhelmed. Not sure all the new buses have made it out there. Let's go ahead and put that up to 300 anyway. Alright, and let's take a look at our metros. Oh wow, the red line is really, really packed. And a lot of that is because we're keeping up with the demand. Let's look at the blue line. It looks like we're doing okay with the demand, but it could be a little better. Let's bump that up to 350. Just in case. And then our green line. That looks like it's functioning pretty well. see what happens with this big stop right here. If trains have enough capacity to handle everything. Yeah, it looks like they will. Okay, so it looks like our metro system and our bus system are working really well together. So now instead of having 3,000, roughly 3,000 on our bus system, we've got about 1,000 on our buses and almost as much as, almost double what we had on our buses on our metros. Now let's look at our traffic flow view. I see a lot less red. And it's not just because of the buses. I see a lot less orange, too. Almost everything is green. And that's because these metros really, really, really do an effective job of getting everybody to walk. If we take a look at some of these lines, we can see the number of car trips they're saving. Let's look at the red line. It's saving about 2/3 of all the car trips. Blue line is pretty close to that, and our green line is also in that neighborhood. And now another thing that I have to point out. This surprised me when I realized it. Look at that. Our metro system is profitable. In real life, that's not something you get to say very often. Even our bus system is very nearly profitable. So the only thing we're spending money on public transportation, and we're almost breaking even with it anyway, is our trains. And that's keeping a lot of cargo off of our highways and our city streets. So now we've really reduced the amount of traffic that we've got on any of our streets. And it's all because we added several metro lines. So, in conclusion, we want to talk about some principles that we've introduced in this series and some of the important facts we want to remember. First off, I can't stress this enough, multiple small is better than one big. You want multiple direct routes because that diffuses traffic. Rather than having one big interchange or one big highway that runs through the middle of your city. You want to build more connections between neighborhoods. As you can see, we've got plenty of connections all across, and even within our neighborhoods, we've got full connectivity to our main thoroughfares, to our arterial roads. You want to make sure that you use highways to get across long distances fast. Short distances, like going from Emerson Park to downtown, those really aren't very far distances. Coming in from out of town and into downtown or into anywhere in our city, that is worth having a highway to connect. What you really want to do is you want to build avenues first if you're having problems with heavy traffic. We demonstrated that having an full interchange up here actually drew too much traffic off of our highways, off onto our highway, which backed up our ramps right here and over here, as well as backing up into the nearby neighborhoods. We don't have that problem anymore, partly because we have the metro system, and partly because we closed this interchange. It's really not worth the trouble. So what do you do if you have a heavy traffic corridor? Well, first off, widen it. Make it into an avenue. If you start out with a side street, like if this street right here had any serious traffic problems, I could widen it. Same thing with 5th Street. If I had a lot of traffic, I could add more capacity to it. So add capacity by building an avenue. The other thing you can do is you can just build parallel routes. Sometimes you don't need to have a big wide road. Sometimes you just need to have more roads connecting two different areas of your city, like we had over here in Emerson Heights. We wanted to, we needed to connect on the other side of the highway over to Cargo Park. We needed to connect into Mill Park and Forest Park. So we, rather than just making everything going down Emerson Boulevard, we had it go down Cargo Boulevard, and we added these 2 streets here as well. That was a far superior way than dealing with the problem than just breaking out higher capacity roads. Also, we can build public transportation. We saw the effect that had on traffic. It's dramatically reduced all of our road traffic across town, especially once we put in metros, which don't have to worry about traffic on the streets to get around. Finally, if you have problems, have an area that is really, really heavy in traffic, and it just takes a long time to get through, you've got a lot of through traffic that's not actually going into that neighborhood, then you want to bypass it with a highway. Don't just build highways as the most direct routes to get somewhere. Really, you want to use it to bypass heavy areas or dense areas so that you can go from one end to the other without having to get stuck in traffic. Also, we've seen that many small interchanges are better than one giant interchange. Lots of us start out with that three-way stack interchange at the beginning of our cities, and then we just leave that as the only interchange into our city. Well, that's not an effective way to use interchanges. We want to have many interchanges. We've got a partial here, we've got a full interchange here, and 2 more full interchanges over here, as well as yet another full interchange at this intersection right here. So build multiple interchanges. Also, don't be afraid to connect across highways like we have here at 5th Street, like we have on Mill Street and Cargo Boulevard, as well as Oak and Forest Avenue, and I think that's Hazel Avenue. So we definitely want to make sure that we don't force our cims to go through interchanges if they're not actually interested in getting on or off the highway. Obviously, that's going to happen sometimes anyway, but we don't want to force them through one single place. Another principle that we want to emphasize in this series is you want to keep your cims within walking distance. Make it so they can live really close to shopping and work and the park. That way they won't have to drive. They can walk. And cims will walk plenty far to get where they want to go. You see, we've got people using public transportation and walking to get to work. So it's really a wonderful thing to be able to take advantage of having the cims, having the zoning such that our cims are able to walk most places they need to go. Only a handful of our cims in this city really need to drive, and that's to get to places like Mill Park. And in a lot of cases, I bet you most of our cims will walk anyway. So then after that, we want to also point out, back to our levels view, that we want to keep our industry alongside our highway and rail routes. We want to build it in long, skinny sections. That way we can have multiple interchanges on the highway and multiple rail terminals serving access to these industrial areas. This cuts down on truck traffic, the big semis or lorries, whatever you want to call it, going through our core. Our trucks can get off at Douglas, Main, High, or 11th and get to all of our industrial areas. So we don't want to zone big blobs of industrial parks either. That will cause a lot of problems for us in the future too. Fourth, we want to remind you that public transportation, building more of that is better than building more roads, because it doesn't put more cars on the road. It therefore keeps the noise down. It also makes it so our cims are able to walk, which takes up a whole lot less space. So always build public transportation, unless you're trying to challenge yourself and build an American-style city. Even in America, though, we have where we have density, we often have plenty of public transportation. And then the last thing we want to talk about is just our intersections. We're not worried about having too many intersections. What we are worried about instead is having the busy ones too close together, like we have here in these red areas. We don't want those to be too close, otherwise there won't be enough storage space in between them for Sims to be able to wait for the traffic light to turn green, and then things back up into and cascade as the busier intersections back up into other busy intersections. Did you find this tutorial useful? I hope so. Please, if you have any questions, leave them in the comments. I have to admit that I wasn't expecting this, but I actually rather enjoy this city. I thought, oh, this is a really boring grid city, but it seems like as I've expanded it and added some curves to it, it's actually gotten to be quite a nice little town. I always end up surprised at how well these cities turn out once you get to building them large enough. They don't start out looking like much, but they definitely can turn into something if you keep going. So rather than just moving on with my life and discarding this, I think we're going to introduce mods. If we do it more money, less traffic, we'll introduce mods. A couple of them I think are going to be of particular interest. We're going to show how to deal with death waves, and we'll also deal with how to handle busy intersections. We might just shut down our metros and set things up, or maybe we'll just expand to a point where we can have more traffic coming into the main part of our city, and show how to handle that using Traffic Manager President Edition to do lane assignments. And also we'll use some assets from mass transit, as well as some network extension roads to allow us to handle more traffic by adding lanes where we need them. So once again, if you have questions, please leave them in the comment section. I'm happy to answer anything you've got. Also, if you're interested in seeing what we've got in store in the future, please subscribe. Thank you so much. So long.